Good Sunday evening, everybody. We are back for yet another. This is episode number 35 of Talking TSR. Welcome. I see there's people already in the chat. They're already chatting things up, which is amazing before
Yeah,
we went on the air. So, Rick, a very good welcome to you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Enjoying the heat here in northern New Jersey. It's been hot, man. Real
Yeah,
hot.
it's been hot. 101 today. It's like hotter
Yeah,
up here than it is down in Florida, which is like insane.
it's
But yeah,
crazy.
it's nuts. It's just like, but yeah, you just don't go outside. It's like really easy. But it's like every time I think of doing something, I'm like, oh yeah. It's like I
Yeah,
shouldn't go wash the car. Boy, if you wash the car or something like these days with the because we're like on voluntary water and stuff.
I
It's like we get
agree.
all
My
kinds of
car's
evil
my
leaders.
car's suffering. I went out
Yeah,
once today, and that was to go swimming. So there
yeah.
you have it.
Well, there you go. That's good. But yeah, it's definitely hot. Summer is definitely here. Before you know it, we'll be complete. It'll be pumpkin spice season, so it'll all be good.
Yep.
Welcome everybody to the show. A couple of quick things, a few announcements before we jump in. This Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, you guys are going to want to check out our Twitch channel, our Goodman Games official Twitch channel. We have another episode of Coming Down the 5e Pike coming at you. So if you guys want to know what's happening with the 5e product line from Goodman Games. I'm going to be your host. I have Michael Curtis is going to be my special guest for the second half of the show. So we're going to talk about a couple of 5e projects that he worked on. And we're going to talk about some of the projects that have recently released, and then we're going to talk a bunch of stuff about Gen Con, because Gen Con is about a week away. Well, at least it's a week away for us who need to leave to get out there early to build things like a ziggurat. So anyway, yes, but we're about a week and a half out from Gen Con. Looking forward to it. Come see us if you guys are in Indy. Come see the ziggurat. Come see the Wizard Van. We're running games. We're running tourneys. There will be seminars. There will be new releases at the booth. There will be Gen Con exclusives. There will be full Twitch coverage. I will be running a game, and it will be live streamed on Thursday morning. So I'll be running a 5e game for Dark Tower. There's that. So there's gonna be a lot of cool stuff. So even if you guys can't make it to Indianapolis, check us out on Twitch, because it'll almost be like you're there, except you're not with 70,000 of your closest friends. So or not so closest friends. So we have another subpar show for you tonight. Remember, last week's show was the amazing best show ever. So we're back down to like regular shows now. But this one's like a 1A kind of show. We're going to be talking about U2 Danger at Dunwater, which is
Hmm.
over my shoulder, one of my shoulders away. We're going to talk about that, which is number 2 in the Saltmarsh series. So Rick, I guess get it started. Just give me when I say Danger Dunwater, what do you think of? What comes to your
Sure.
mind?
I think of a well-realized Lizardman lair. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I think it's probably the best treatment, or certainly the earliest treatment of a Lizardman layer we've seen. And I like the plug and play ability of it. Even if you hate the adventure, you could just steal this Lizardman layer, take it, transfer it into your campaign. Even if you play fifth edition or what have you, easily translate it, and you could just take this, steal it. So I think the adventure is worth picking up just to get the Lizardman lair, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're going to get into that in our discussion on it, because this adventure is. I know we've probably said this before, but it's like no other. It's like,
Hmm.
for the timing when this came out too. This module did things that really hadn't really been done before. So
Hmm.
and I think pretty much the same design team was working on this that you won, and I think a lot of what we've talked about on our last
Yep.
show, you won. I think you're going to kind of hear again.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I think an interesting thing when it's funny. So when we do these reviews, obviously, we're not schlubs here. We prepare ahead of time, folks. We
Hmm.
we review the modules, and we remember these things. And there's always
Yeah.
that one thing that comes to mind. Like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of this module is, for whatever reason, the giant lizard attack.
Yeah.
Probably because there was
Yep.
half-page art for it. Just like Village of Hamlet, the first thing I always think of is the giant frog attack.
Hmm.
There's always like an encounter or something. So that's
Yeah.
the one I always like remember. But I was thinking more. I was wrapping my head around the 5e treatment of these modules, and also once again just a little piece of me dying when I heard that Wizards of the Coast did 5e
Yeah.
versions of these, and we, poor little Goodman Games, didn't get the chance. You know, thank you very much, Castle Amber. No, I didn't say that. So but anyway, what I was thinking from the 5e standpoint is, for those 5e fans that are out there, you have the three pillars of 5e adventure. You have exploration, you have social interaction, and you have combat. All right. And a good 5e
Yeah.
adventure is going to have, pretty equal doses of all of those. Well, think about this trilogy of adventures. So really, adventure number one is really all about exploration. If you think about it, it's all about finding out the plot and investigating a ship and investigating a haunted house. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
The second module in the series is supposed to be all about social interaction. I mean, literally, this is an adventure that can be run where you can never pull the sword out of your sheath. Now, we all know between all of us that that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, the module is designed where it's a social action kind of is the main theme of this one. And then just the cherry on top, spoiler alert for our show 3 weeks from now, but the final module in the series is really all about combat, and then they're like, well, let's just take combat to the 11th degree and let's just put it underwater because that's just cool. So I thought that's fascinating that the series really has those three main beats, and it's like, instead of that being in each adventure, it's really like, and I'm sure they weren't thinking this back in the early 80s when they were devising these, but it's just interesting how that applies today. So I fascinated.
That's a really cool observation, because it works out so cleanly in that way too.
It does.
And even if I wasn't maybe thinking of it in those terms, which I think is a great way to put it, I love the different beats. I love the different feels of the modules, because they absolutely feel connected when you read them. As you kind of hinted, these were written by the same person, the same group. You feel the same sensibility throughout the module and the way it's treated in the notes and what have you. And yet there is a different feel as you kind of progress through the various adventures, which I like. And obviously, like you said, this one's very different for reasons I'm sure we'll go into.
Yeah, definitely. I see G Blaster has made it. Hey, G Blaster, how's it
there
going?
He is. Hey,
lots of other people. Clay Ford. I guess he's been very active in this. So yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to see and see your words that you're typing. It's awesome. So yeah, this module, again, love it. What you said is dead on. You could take pieces of this adventure and use them. You could use it as a straight combat piece if you wanted to. You could just change the plot around and not do that. You could make this could definitely be one of those ones where they're never going to attack anything, depending on how you play it. I love that, and I love that aspect of it. And I also really enjoy the variability of the environments, which is the first module we got haunted house, a little bit of cellars, and a ship. I mean, that's great. I mean, that keeps things vibrant, interesting. It's not just the slog between, oh, we're on level 1 of the dungeon, oh, more caves, now we're level 2 of the dungeon, then level 3, level 4. That was probably one of the trickiest things when we were designing Castle White Rock with its 29 levels, was how to kind of make them different. And you do have a couple was all right, yes, we do have to have a couple of work levels and stuff like that, but how do you make them different? How do you make them feel different? And how do you make the overall levels kind of feel different? And that's definitely, that really is important when you're doing obviously a mega dungeon. Great. So I want to talk first. I want to jump in with artwork. So cover art is awesome. You can see it behind me there. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating that cover art does not feature a lizard folk. I think that is amazing. I think at first glance you think it is one, but it's not. That's a Lokatha. I used to call him Lokatha. I don't know.
Lokatha,
on a giant eel. So I think that's fascinating. I think that's really, I guess if you think about it, really good foreshadowing. That and I don't know if they intended that. I just think it's a really cool piece of artwork. I think they just came back and they said, wow, we got to put that on the cover somewhere. I think it was really good foreshadowing that it is not a lizard folk on the front, even though you're basically hit over the head from the get-go that you're going to be going to a lizard folk lair. So
Yeah.
I love that. So what do you think about the cover and the back cover? And
I love the front cover. I don't think we have the graphic, but I love the back cover with the
yeah,
very kind of classic lizard, the kind of squared off,
yep, yep,
visage of the lizard man. I love that. And looking kind of threatening in the back. So, it can be a little confusing given the plot.
yep,
I love the interior art. I think Holloway's art knocks it out of the park. Like you said, I absolutely agree. One of the first things that comes to mind when I think of this adventure is the giant lizard art. Just
wow, okay,
pops
yeah,
right in my head. I think that and the bullywugs. I just think of those two shots.
yeah,
And we have a nice selection of art, different art
yep,
styles in here. I mean, again, I think Holloway is my number one for this because his art always manages to retain a little humor around the
yes,
edges,
yes, yes, yes,
but very
yes,
evocative. Like every little picture he draws sort of tells a story, in the
yep,
lizard men, I mean, excuse me, in that giant lizard picture, you picture this being like a playback almost of the adventurers that ventured into the lair and what befell them. And then, there's another shot with a bunch of like a gang of lizard men hanging out. And you can see like looks like they're choking among themselves. And it
yep,
kind of tells you something about their personality,
yeah.
you know. So very evocative.
Yeah, and I love the use of the different sizes of the artwork. There's a couple of long, thin pieces. There's
Yeah.
obviously some half-page shots. There's some half-pagers, but they're not like at the top or the bottom. They're like in the middle.
Mhm.
I did a great job. Again, I think I counted the art in this. There's a little bit less art than you won, but I think it still comes out to 21 or 22
Mhm.
pieces, I think. And again, it's a 32-page adventure. So
Yeah.
we had a couple of adventures that were like 32 pages and had like 5 or 6 pieces of art and tiny and also didn't even really more or less fit with the adventure. You can tell they were just kind of putting art in there almost for the sake of putting art in there. But the
Yeah.
art in here are like they show you, like you said, scenes that
Mhm.
are in the event, things that are going to
Yeah.
happen where you could
Yeah.
easily show the art to the players.
Yeah.
And you could be like,
Absolutely.
you're in this room, this is what you see.
And
And
that's important, art like the
yeah,
giant lizard art, that sort of almost sells the encounter for me. When I see that, even as a DM, I sort of get excited about the encounter, just
yeah,
seeing that picture because I immediately it strikes home the environment of that particular encounter, the mud, what's going on. It suddenly makes things seem even more dangerous than just saying, oh, here's 3 giant lizards. So
yeah.
yeah, it just, it brings the adventure over and above. And like you said, very well realized art. Virtually all the art pertains to this adventure directly.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, tells that story, which is great,
Mhm.
which is just
Yeah.
yeah, perfect. I mean, I do recall when I ran this adventure several times in the past that I would frequently use the art as handouts to be like, hey, this is what you see. This is kind of setting the scene and
Mhm.
everything, because it just completes the picture of everything. Maps. Let's talk about the maps. Not as
Mhm.
many maps in here, not as evocative as the ship map and the haunted house map, I don't think, in
Mhm.
U1. But what do you think about the maps?
I like the maps. I like the zoom in. I've always liked the kind of where you go from the area maps and you drill down. I love the fact that the setting, kind of the outer setting, is in Greyhawk. I mean, obviously it could be transplanted anywhere,
Yeah,
but the fact that, I mean, obviously it's close to Saltmore since it's related, but the fact that it's kind of right, whatever is it, right above the Hold of the Sea Princes, right below I guess it's the Yeomanry. um I like the fact that Greyhawk is included in there. I like the fact that you're given an actual map of the Dunwater, and how that all
mhm,
connects. And beyond that, the dungeon map, yeah, it doesn't maybe blow your socks off, but it's absolutely usable and understandable. There's nothing confusing about it. Nice, clean map work. So that
yeah,
can be a blessing in itself. Honestly, if I get a map that I can look at and instantly understand all the rooms and how they work and the secret doors, that's the first checkbox for me.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I like the fact that they stuck to one level because
Hmm.
it's a marsh. I think that was one of the things that put me off a little bit. I think on the village of Orlane, that dungeon in Cult of the Reptile God, how I believe there was 2 dungeon levels there, and I was like, but it's a swamp. How does that
Yeah.
really work? And it was like, yeah, I think they hand waved a little bit of stuff there.
Yeah.
So I do like that. Again, yes, I think there's 52 encounter areas, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's a couple of there's an encounter in the beginning, and there's an encounter table, and then there's another encounter at the end. So definitely a lot of content there. What I think I really liked a lot, and I maybe almost want a little bit more, but there was enough here. Multiple ways in.
Mm-hmm.
There was the front door,
Yep.
which you would expect, but there were two other ways in, sea
Yeah.
caves in basically. And the aforementioned giant lizards were basically guarding one of those ways in.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall, I think when I first played this module, that was our first encounter. We went
Mm-hmm.
in that way and fought the giant lizards. And then most of the time when we ran it, I would say most of the time people would not use the front door; they would go another way. So definitely a great design lesson
Mm-hmm.
there on multiple ways in and or
Yeah.
out. I think that's something that is great. You don't want to funnel, you always want to give choices. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing. Even though you might not want to give them 20 choices of how they want
Mm-hmm.
to do this, but you want to give them 4 or 5 choices or whatever.
Yeah.
And you want those choices to be meaningful, not like, Tome of Horrors, where the choices were kind of not meaningful. It's like there was really
Death,
only one
death, or
way.
death.
So, yeah, death, or serious damage, and then I'll let you into the dungeon. So I think that was good. It's like basically either way you went in,
Yeah.
that you were going to have to face a different set of challenges, and
Yeah.
I like that. I maybe would have wanted one more way in, maybe a secret
Mm-hmm.
way in or something like that.
Yeah.
But and of course, obviously, I've been diving back into Dark Tower a lot lately, and everybody most fans of that know about Jaquazing the dungeon, and how Janelle was just amazing at the interlevel connections and various connections and everything, and how you go about doing that and just making it interesting. And I think you see that here. You don't have different levels, so you don't have that, but the authors make up for it with those multiple entrances. So I really
Mm-hmm.
got a kick out of that, and I enjoyed that extra little tidbit there. What else you got?
Well, let's address, I guess, the elephant in the room, or the giant lizard in the room, as it were. The whole kind of plot, obviously major spoiler. The fact that you're basically venturing into a lair full of lizardmen that the characters may very well go hacking and slashing their way through, and these guys are not the bad guys. These
Yeah.
guys are potentially your allies. Now, there are copious notes provided. I counted like 5.5 pages of notes. So again, that same kind of helpful notes that were provided in U1 carry, the same philosophy carried over here. So the authors were aware of it. They certainly tried to hold your hand and help you with it as much as possible. But I think it's still a big stumbling block. I think, whereas I thought U1 was a great module for beginning DMs, I think this is not a good module for beginning DMs. And
I
it's a
would agree.
jarring switch if you're a starting DM and you start with one and you think you're going to roll right into this one. Things could really go off the rails. So, and even situations like the Weregild problem, which again is handled copiously addressed in notes and an optional adventure, and all, they gave you everything they could to help you with it, but it's still a potentially difficult situation.
Yeah, can you let I think most people might think you're talking about a guild of lycanthropes when you say were guild.
Oh,
So give us some filling, because I remember back in the day having to look that word up, and then also having to look that word up again to make sure I understood it before this show. So tell us what the were guild is in that situation.
in this situation, it's basically a recomps. It's something, that the lizardmen ultimately are not the final bad guy. The situation posed by the module is that the characters very well may believe the lizardmen to be the enemy, because the smugglers from U1 were arming the lizardmen. So, that leads people to believe, including the people of Saltmarsh, the elders or what have you, to think, hey, the lizardmen are planning something. Little do the people of Saltmarsh realize that the lizardmen are arming themselves because they are afraid of, some neighboring Sahuagin that have, been encroaching. So anyway, to make a long story short, yeah, the situation is that if the characters go rampaging through here, they need to sort of pay something back to the tribe and to the leader of the tribe, as a way of making up for the fact that they killed half the people in the lair, basically. Which again, to me, seems a little, I have little trouble sitting with that, but I think it's all they could have done. So yeah, the Weregild is basically sort of that payback, and you have to put this in the context of first edition, in that, you know, gold and experience kind of went hand in hand. And again, it is addressed in the notes ways to address this. But it's a little different for folks used to playing fifth edition or something, where either, you know, experience is gained through other means or split equally or this and that, where, you know, in first edition, people would be, you know, going to great lengths to get their hands on that 12,000 GP crown or whatever, because they knew it meant a big, you know, glut of experience. And you have a situation here with the Well Guild where the characters could kill a bunch of monsters, steal a bunch of treasure, and then be asked not only to give 90% of the treasure back, but then pay something on top of that for killing the monsters that they felt they were supposed to kill. So again, I think you need the right kind of DM running this, so you don't get some upset players on your hands. You know, I think you need experienced DM and experienced players, you know.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that's a great way to kind of to sum that up, is basically your adventurers are paying to adventure instead of adventuring to get money. So they're going to get money, and then they have to give most of it back, and there's notes about like what they don't have to give back. But yeah, so, and I think that's kind of a sticky thing. That, and again, they do a wonderful job of giving you ways around this and preparing the game master for you know, how you can deal with this particular situation. But at the end of the day, the Lizard King is going to demand retribution for if you slaughter, you know, and you know, and it's per lizard folk that's slaughtered. And it's like, so if you go in and you take out 50 of them, you know, you're going to pay 50 times whatever the agreed amount is. And, you know, and like I said, some of those solutions are, you know, you can grant XP for that. Some of the solutions are the town can flip in and pay part of that, you know, fee. There's an optional encounter at the end that you know, basically go do a favor for the Lizard Folk King, and then you won't have to pay because that's a service. So they give you lots of options. And it's, but you know, that's not going to help you at the table when you have your, I kind of think back to like the Knights of the Dinner Table gang. Like,
neutral greedy,
this,
right?
I'm surprised if this was not like, if the Weregild was not like one of the plots at some point where they went in and slaughtered a whole, you know, dungeon full of monsters, and then somebody came and said, well, that was a petting zoo, and now you owe me, you know, whatever, and you owe me fee for going into the zoo, or you know, something crazy like that. That's like right up their alley for a storyline. And boy, if someone hasn't done that, somebody needs to get that gang.
You know, like you said, they give you every note possible. I think they absolutely are aware of the issue, and they, you know, they try to address it and offer a whole bunch of different solutions. I mean, I even think it's funny at the end. There's some note, I think, toward the end of the modules, the effect of, well, the characters pretty much wipe out the whole lair and go back to Saltmarsh and say mission accomplished. Then I think the Sea Elves or somebody show up and say, oh, it looks like the Lizardmen, you know, got wiped out by the Sahuagin. And then everybody kind of looks at, you know,
and the politicians quickly shift gears, and they're like, oh wow,
great.
We're worried about
those
that.
darn Sahuagin.
It's like we should probably form an alliance and do something about that. If only we knew what to do. But I would agree. I thought that was kind of funny and everything. So so that's it. You know, one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is, again, the details in this module, and this is, we talked about this at length in U1 on just the attention to detail. And I'll give a couple of examples here. So example number one is apparently before the adventurers get there, another band of adventurers like happened upon the lizard folk lair and penetrated it, and apparently attacked and killed some of the lizard folk, and apparently they were all defeated, and you can find clues and remains at some points of them in the lair. But it's interesting in how it puts the lizard folk on edge. And so when the PCs arrive, like the lizard folk are actually kind of itching for a fight. So like they're not, you know, it's like you're not gonna just waltz in there and they're gonna be like, hey, we're all on your side. No, they're like, you know, we just had like last week, you know, another group of adventurers just kind of came through here and kicked our butts, and now we're like really worried. Here comes another one, and it's like, and we're also worried about the Sahuagin. So So I love that detail. And then another detail that I just absolutely love, and this is something that, you know, they probably the PCs can probably get on the exploration front is, the lizard folk need to keep their skin moist. And
Hmm.
normally they would just go take a dip in the water and they would go, and that's how they would hydrate and everything. But it says right in the module that they're
Yeah.
actually concerned about that because of the
Yeah.
Sahuagin. The Sahuagin live in the water, and they
Yeah.
don't want to just go out and swim in a bay because that's probably going to be a bad thing. So, but they address that by saying that they use
Mhm.
vegetable oil basically, and there's in
Yeah.
every room there's little containers of vegetable oil and gaudy colored cloths and rags that they
Hmm.
use to apply it on their skin. Just things like that
Yeah.
that makes sense. We talk about dungeon ecology all the time,
Yeah.
but just putting that line in there and did it all right, it took a couple sentences to add that little section in there, but that just seems to make it like more believable
Oh
and
yeah.
and
It
just gives
adds
a
a little
reason for it.
verisimilitude because there
Yeah.
was a lot of little details like that, and a lot of, like you said, there was little hints that the lizard men like gaudy things. There's some
Yep.
places where they have gaudy fabrics or feathers or this or that. And reading the module again, you get the recently, even I got the sense of, oh, so that's how the lizard men do things, kind of that it fills in little details. Because I've always said about some of the races in the monster manual, I think, or even Fiend Folio especially, to me, some of the most boring ones is where they just give you a race and they give you no detail and they just say,
Yeah.
well, it's like, John Carter, Lord of Mars, or so, where they're like, oh, these are dog men and these are cat men and these are Batmen. And it's like, no, I want to know something more. And this module does that in the layer. It does give you some of those little details like the cloths and the skin, and where you start understanding how the lizard men behave. And I think it's a fascinating look at a neutral race, because you don't always get those
Yeah.
neutral encounters on this level.
Agreed.
You're so used to just hacking into a bunch of orcs or goblins that to run into a bunch of lizard men that can absolutely be dangerous, and yet they're neutral. It's interesting to me. I find it really an interesting premise.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they put those clues all throughout
Oh yeah. Yeah.
about why they were purchasing the weapons, the
Hmm.
Sahuagin. There's plenty of this. There's a
Oh yeah.
prison Sahuagin.
Yeah.
There are lots of little breadcrumbs that if you
Hmm.
poke around, you can
Yeah.
figure out like something different is going on,
Yeah.
and they're not just necessarily the bad guys.
Yeah. Even the
Um,
way they're presented, like the actual lizard men, you have some lizard men children playing
yep.
in the throne room. You
Yep.
have females that are not necessarily hostile to the party. You have a scene with females cooking, and again, maybe the carcass could be looked at the wrong way initially,
Yeah.
but especially when used with the artwork, it's kind of hard to look at all these illustrations and think, well, these are the bad guys, or these
Yeah.
creatures need to be slaughtered to a person, so to speak.
Yeah.
So to me, that's just that, plus all the Sahuagin carcasses and heads, and
Yep.
great job to me with both those beats, of stressing that, hey, one, the lizard men are potentially friendly, or at least just a different sort of humanoid, and then B, there's something going on here where they do not like the Sahuagin. There's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
little clues there, like you said, the prisoner being the most standout one.
Yeah.
And the prisoner is probably the one person in the whole lair who acts evil, so red flag.
Yeah, yeah, and I get it, and I will admit that first time I ran this adventure, it was kind of a disaster. I mean, it was like because yeah, back in the early '80s, you just kick the door down and you kick the
Hmm.
monster's butt and take their loot.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Even today, I'm like the play test I was doing the other week. I mean, it was just like the ranger was like, I have a plan, and we're like, all right, what's the plan? He's like, well, it involves rolling initiative, and I'm like, well, that's not really a plan now, is it? And it's like, I was all excited because I didn't think they were going to use weapon blows to solve the
Yeah.
problem, and it's like, nope, it's just like, yeah, we're done with the talking, let's just get to the end. And it's like, I get it, it's a role-playing game, that's what we're all here for, that's what
Yeah.
some people are there for. So that's one thing. So all right, so before we get to our top five list, wait, do you have any things that you want to touch on before we move into another exciting list of our favorite parts?
No, I think I hit everything. Like you said, I love the detail. I
Hmm.
think there's little odd little details, like I thought the treasure was very well realized.
Yes.
Here you have sort of
Yes.
many rooms of low level treasure, and yet they're all handled differently. And I love
Yeah.
the one room where there's a needle with no poison,
Hmm.
but there's a sense that you want to make the players nervous about
Yeah.
there being a trap. So I love that. So yeah, uh, but yeah, I think we can roll on.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great use of read aloud text, in my opinion. They did some really
Hmm.
nice things because there's some of the chambers where, you could kind of enter different ways depending on which way you come in. Was very different, handling of the encounter. So I thought they did that very well. So yeah, let's jump into it. So do you have an honorable mention or not as you consult your list?
I do not.
Okay,
I
I
do
have an
not.
honorable mention, so I guess I'll lead with that then. So, I
Okay.
had a hard time putting together a top five list because I probably could have done a top 10 list. I would say. I mean, I had a really hard time of whittling it down to my five favorite encounters. There were a lot of things I really like about this adventure, and even like more than I
Hmm.
remembered probably originally. So I was a little bit surprised. But my honorable mention is Area 51, the Lokatha pool. Again, it's on the cover, and probably that has something to do with it. But the giant eels, the 20-foot long giant eels, that were their mounts, was amazing. The fact that they will basically not attack you. They will, if you attack one of the other factions
Hmm.
nearby, they'll definitely come and support them. But basically,
Hmm.
they don't speak common, and basically they'll just look at you and be like, "We don't know how to talk to you people," and it's kind of a frustrating social encounter. But I always love the inclusion of those, and I definitely had a nod. I had Locust that were foundational to my Secret of the Smuggler's Cove. That's part of the reason. I was always like, "Whoa, Lokatha," and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
you guys have never been like featured before, and I was fascinated, like fish creatures that like live in the ocean. It was like kind of cool, and they weren't like mermen or tritons because there was lots of different ones in there. So,
Yeah.
so that was my honorable mention. So,
That almost made my list actually.
okay,
That series of areas I
well,
really
yeah,
like. Um, though I guess my number five touches on that, and this is the only faucet I have. The rest I have are kind of straight out encounters. But
okay,
I touched on this earlier, but again, I really love that sort of inside outside map design. I love the
mhm,
fact that the dungeon map links so clearly, at least to me, with the outside map where you have the various entrances and you can look at one and you can look at the other. And if you look at the layer map, you can kind of see how they tell you in the text, but you can see how they all connect. And
yeah,
moreover, it's well realized. The sea entrances, there's a lot of patrols there. There's iron gates. They've kind of got extra precautions in place and that. And then, you've got the giant lizards just happen to be hanging out in the, area that comes in from the swamp. So like each of the areas, not only the entrances are different, but they make sense. The way the lizardmen set up defense and the way they're living and the way everything is kind of set up, it all makes logical sense. Like you said, it's lovely that they have different ways in. That the characters don't just have to stroll through the front door if they don't want to. If you have the sort of characters that, again, they might think the lizardmen are the enemies, so they might want to try to sneak in through a side door, and they could very well end up coming in through the, like, the giant lizard door, so to speak. So I just love the way that's all done. Again, maybe a simple one floor map, but the way it connects with the outer map, it all makes sense. So I really love that aspect of it.
cool, excellent. All right. Well, mine are all encounters.
Okay.
So my number five is Area 26, the Treasure Room. And
Mm-hmm.
treasure rooms are definitely a trope, a
Mm-hmm.
staple. And this one was done, I thought, really done well. First of all, there's a gate before
Mm-hmm.
you got to the treasure room, and there's a picture of the gate. And if you read the description of the gate and you look at that picture, they are spot on. I
Yeah.
mean, they are
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's like they're like there's five
Mm-hmm.
horizontal bar, and it's like one, two, three, four, there's five. And it's like it was wonderful that. So first you got to get through a gate. Then there's a secret door to go to treasure room. You most likely will bypass that the first go around, and then you'll go right to the end of the room hall, and that's like the barracks, the guard room. Not
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of guards, but they're there. Then, if you find the secret door, then there is a tilting floor after the secret door that then opens up to a pit that for some reason is 12 feet deep. I'm not really sure why it's 12 feet deep, unless they needed an extra 2 feet for the tilt part.
Yeah.
Maybe they still wanted to drop you 10 feet. I'm like, that's the only thing I can think of, but it's like oddly specific that it was like 12 feet deep.
Yeah.
And then I love it, snakes at the bottom of the pit.
Hmm.
And regular snake stats, if I recall, were not in the monster manual. There were giant snakes, but there were not like regular snakes, I don't think, because
I don't think regular snakes came
yeah.
along until the Monster Manual too, right? I think.
Exactly. So I thought that was kind of cool. Because they even mentioned that, I
Yeah.
think, in the thing that they're saving
Yeah.
throw. I think you had an
Yeah.
additional bonus
Using
or
a
a
live
venomous snake.
animal as part of the trap instead
Yeah.
of a mechanized device. It so fits with the theme.
Exactly. I love that. I thought it was really cool. And then you actually got to the treasure, and the way they presented the treasure, like you said, interesting with the treasure. It wasn't just here's a bunch of coins and 7 gems. It's like I
Yeah.
love the little detail where they tell you what types of gems there were. When I was a kid back in the 80s, I was always looking up in the encyclopedia or yeah, because we didn't have the internet back then, folks. Like what's a peridot? I had no idea what a peridot was. What's a garnet? What's a topaz? What's a citrine? And
Yeah.
it's like, so you would find out what all these things are. And you're like, oh, that's what that is. Okay, I can describe that now. So I love that. I love the little details on that seem to make things it just takes a little bit. It doesn't take that many more words to describe it that way.
Hmm.
But just I love the way. And I think they even used bullet points, I think, for the treasure. And yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think I'd come across a module that used bullet points before that. And I thought that was a really cool, that to me, again, that was like, again, folks, I'm like 11, 12 years old. Like bullet
Yeah.
points were a thing. And I was like, whoa,
Mhm.
what is that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
now we take bullet points for granted in
Yeah.
PowerPoints mostly. But it was a great presentation. And
Yeah.
that's my number 5, Area 26, the treasure room.
I agree. And maybe we won't have any crossovers. I have to tell
So
you, and I'm not just saying this, that was on my list and then it went off my list,
awesome.
because
We'll have crossovers,
I
I'm
love
sure
the
of it.
gates. Like you said, I love the use of gems. It makes me think back of when I was young and I played first edition. At one point I went out and I bought one of these little geologist hand guides of
Oh, and that's Tim. Tim
that's
on it.
yeah.
That's Tim, and Tim nailing it. Why it was 12 feet deep. That is amazing. It was
You
really
can
4
take
meters deep.
Tim out
Yeah.
of the editor, but you can't take the editor out of Tim.
Wow. That is, oh my gosh,
Nice
Tim.
call. Wow.
That is amazing.
So what there was I was oh yeah, but I remember back in the day picking up a little like handbook to gems and gemstones, and
Yeah.
like a little geologist
Yeah.
book that I started using as a DM reference,
Yep.
because it had pictures of all these gems and because they would call out all these things in these old modules, and I didn't know what they were.
Yeah. I didn't get that
So
until I took geology in sophomore year in college. And then I was
that's
like, oh
funny.
my God, I should have taken geology back when I was 10 years old, because it
Yeah,
would
because
have
it's
been much more handy for
like
my
you
D&D
said,
game.
if you said, if you say emerald or
Yeah. Diamond, ruby.
diamond or something like that, yeah, people might know. But when you start going into, even certain
Malachite.
types of garnets, and people are
Yeah.
like, what?
Yep.
So agree. All right, so where are we? Number 4.
Number 4.
Kind of two conjoined areas, but I'm going to cheat here. Areas
Crossover.
38 and 39, the Lizardmen Minister area, I think is cool. In the time I ran this, and I only ran this one time, sadly, had a lot of fun with this old guy, this old kind of Lizardman minister. I think it's really cool that there's a sort of political dynamic going on in the lair, where the shaman are barking up one tree and the
Yep.
minister is sort of more progressive, and there's a little, conflict there going on within the Lizardman lair, which the players might end up on one side or the other. I love the way his lair is described, and then the little books and things that are detailed in his sleeping chamber is great. And there's even a little shout out where there's, speak of gems, there's a Tensor's book of gems, where it's like the occult properties of gems, and it riffs off of U1, because in U1, in the treasure in the alchemist area, there's a book by Tensor called The Magical Properties of Gems. So here they've done a little callback to the first module and said, well, here's the next book in the series by Tensor that you just happen to find in the Lizardman lair, which I think is hysterical. So it's just such a great little detail, like things like that. So yeah, it's the whole little package. that's my number 4 is the Lizardmen Minister area. I think it's play area with great role play potential.
Great. All right. My number 4 is a crossover, and it's the same number too. Boy, we should have some kind of a whistle or something. So yes,
Oh,
Area 38, and I did even throw on a little bit of 39 too, because
that's
there
funny.
was some cool stuff in 39 as well.
Ding.
Yes, so ding, ding, ding,
Ring the
ding, ding.
bell.
So yeah, so again, and for all the reasons that Rick just mentioned, I will add a couple of other little things. But yeah, that dynamic, that political faction dynamic between the shamans and the minister was very interesting. And basically, so if you actually end up killing the minister, that's actually a bad thing because the shamans don't want an
Yeah.
alliance, and they
Yeah.
don't want to work with the other races. So that'll actually turn the Lizardmen potentially against you, depending on how the power structure ends up. The chief seems to be pretty open to listening to the minister and everything, but if you did something, maybe
Yeah.
he could be swayed. So I thought that was fascinating. Yes, the books were amazing. The titles of the books, and
Yeah.
again, you know, probably I was like, I don't remember other modules that had the titles of books. I mean, how many times you're like, oh, you find 5 old books, and it's always like the players are like, what are the books on? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you know, magic and alchemy and you know, stuff
Mhm.
like that. So they actually give you the titles and give you a little bit of blurb of what each book does. It actually took like a quarter of a page, I think, for those 4
Mhm.
books, and actually gave you a little bit of author name and some details. I love that. I love again the attention to detail here in his personal chambers, area 39. He has a chest, and then the chest is locked. The key is affixed to the back of the chest with some sort of sticky substance. They don't
Yeah.
tell you what it
Yeah.
is, but some sort of sticky substance. And then there's a discolored leather
Mhm.
glove nearby.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, and just one, and it's like all discolored. You're like, what the heck? Amazing. The
Yeah.
key is covered with contact poison.
Mhm.
And of course, that's what the lizard folk minister uses to handle the key without poisoning himself.
Yeah.
He uses the glove, and the glove is all discolored from the contact poison. So again, stuff like that where you know, maybe one of the players will pick up on that and be like, why is
Mhm.
there one leather discolored glove? And it's like, oh, good
Yeah.
lord, you know, maybe you've got a character with a poisoning background or something like that. And you know, in the modern game, you know, if you have somebody with the poisoner kit proficiency, you know, maybe you give them a proficiency check to say, well, maybe
Mhm.
I'll try and figure something out, like what's that all about, and they might be able to actually, you know, prevent themselves from being poisoned. Because as I thought that was brilliant with contact poison, because that's
Yeah.
just touching it.
Yeah.
Everybody's always like, you know, the thief's like, I picked the lock. Well, if you pick the
Mhm.
lock, you're probably going to touch it at some
Yeah.
point, you know, probably in the key especially. So I love that. Yeah, again, I
Mhm.
love how the two encounters kind of work together. That's why they were kind of like an A and a B kind of part and
Yeah.
everything. And again, they were wow. I think it was that area 38. I think was like a page, if I'm not mistaken. It
Mhm.
was just, or it was just about a full page. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So
Great
that's my number
detail.
4 crossover with Sir Rick, the Lizard Man minister.
There we go. We have a crossover. Yeah, just such good detail, man. And like you said, I don't know how I didn't mention the contact poison because there's so many places in this dungeon where there are chests and there are kind of treasure that could have been dreadfully similar,
Yep.
and yet the traps vary, where again, like I mentioned earlier, they have one threatening sort of pin trap that's just
Yep.
scares the players. They've got gas blows out a chest in one room. You've got,
Yeah.
you know, this one where it's contact point. Like they really tried to vary it up, and there's a lot of little notes about little lizard men knickknacks that aren't necessarily worth anything, but that the DM can drop into different chests or places that way. Instead of just saying, oh, you find personal effects again, he can actually say you find a little bag full of colored stones, or you find
Yeah.
this or that, which to me, that extra level of detail puts it over the top. So
Yeah.
absolutely agree. So we're on to number 3.
Number 3.
This one I'm putting not hyper detailed perhaps in the text, but I think it's for what it gives you that you can run with, is Area F, the optional venture, which is the giant crocodile being controlled by the Oriental dragon. What is it? The Panlong,
Yeah.
I think. Um, I like the fact, first off, the utility of that encounter, that they put that in there and they kind of say, well, the lizardmen have this problem that you could solve. And then, you know, solving that problem for the lizardmen can potentially solve a werewolf problem for the characters. I like the utility of it. I think it's a cool encounter that I've run it and it worked out really nicely. So I think if you play the dragon right, and the dragon isn't even aware of this whole political kind of or this bigger game going on, with the Sahuagin and all these races, he's just doing his thing. But I think it's a cool setup for an optional little encounter. I love the fact that they just sort of threw that in there at the end and gave you the utility of that really good encounter. So that's my number 3 is that area F.
Okay, awesome. All right, my area number 3, we've already talked about it a little bit here. I'm putting down area 22, the Cave of the Giant Lizards. So we talked about the giant lizards already a fair amount. And again, is this an amazing encounter? No, it's not. It's 3 giant lizards in a room. There's a little bit of there's mud. So you've got mud, and it's difficult to move through the mud. It's like 15 inches deep. And so you've got difficult terrain, if you will, where it slows your movement. So that could definitely impact things. But again, for me, it's the artwork, it's the nostalgia. This was the first encounter that I ran into when playing this module.
Yeah.
It's what I remember. And what I think is fascinating about this was about the time when I had read, I think it was a National Geographic article or something on the Komodo dragon. And if you look at that artwork, they are Komodo dragons.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was cool to think of all giant lizards in D&D to be Komodo dragons. Essentially, they're living things. We have them. They're like 10 feet long or something like that. They're essentially giant lizards, and definitely if you look at the scale in there that they caught it. So I just loved that connective tissue there.
Yeah.
And I like to think that maybe the artist also read that same article possibly and was inspired by that. So again, not the best encounter in the world, but it's definitely got a very, very strong nostalgia pull for me. And I love the fact that there was a very nice magic sword that was hidden in the mud. And if you searched around a fair amount, you could find in that sword was an intelligent sword that had some special abilities. And always a nice thing to find, and it was one of those remnants from that previous adventuring band. So again, love that, all those little tie-ins and everything.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it makes sense why a sword would be discarded here. They came in and the breastplate was there but was destroyed, and not usable. But underneath the breastplate is the sword. So so that is my number 3, Area 22, the Cave of the Giant Lizards.
Nice. Well, with my number 2 encounter, gotta ring the bell again for another crossover.
Oh wow.
Area 22, Cave of the Giant Lizards. You said it all. It's in rereading it sung so loudly in my memory, and when going back and rereading it now, there was a sense of, oh, this is just kind of 3 giant lizards in mud, and yet, like you said, that illustration just
did it.
I don't know what it is. That illustration just takes that encounter, and you can't look at that illustration and not want to show it to the players and not want to run that encounter. It just something about that illustration just elevates that encounter to something special. So I love it. I like the treasure detail. Again, a hint to the adventuring party coming in. I kind of in my mind imagined about at least half of them being wiped out right in in that cave. And the fact that the characters might find this, they go to detail talking about how this breastplate's been detached from the armor, and they might find this useless breastplate, but maybe if they find that breastplate, they'll dig a little deeper and then find this sword that is, yet another kind of layer deep below that in the mud, which I think is a nice little detail because I played it that way where the characters had to kind of persevere, and dig a little further to find the sword. So I love that little detail. So yeah, that was an easy number 2. It almost hit number 1 for me. Was just, and like you said, pure nostalgia too. Just
awesome.
The nostalgia bell is ringing very loudly on that one.
Cool. Sweet. All right. Yeah, I like that choice. That's a great one. My number 2, this will surprise nobody in the room or in the chat. Maybe it'll surprise them that it's number 2 and not number 1. But it's the Bullywug Ambush. So of course, I love me that and we have a raiding party of 11 coming in from DM Jeremy. Hey everybody, raid. Love it. Thanks guys.
It's a raid.
So welcome. We're talking about classic TSR module, U2, Danger at Dunwater. So the Bullywug Ambush, I think a couple things here. If this goes the way the author thinks it's going to go, there might not be a whole lot of combat. So let's give them a combat right out of the gate. and is pretty clear combat. The bullywugs find a chest of treasure, and they're not sure what to do with it, and they're like, "Oh, summon the great chieftain, and we'll guard this treasure." So basically, it's kind of weird if you think about it. It's kind of weird. It's basically a chest of treasure, and there's 25 bullywugs guarding it in
Mhm.
the middle of the wilderness that you run
Yeah.
into like 3 miles from the lair. So a little bit strange, but again, they gave that little backstory of it's not
Mhm.
just bullywugs and a chest of treasure. They found it, they know it's valuable, but they're not really sure what to do with it. They are clearly waiting for their superior officers to come and tell them what the heck to do. Love it. There's some tactics in there. Again, they detail the treasure. It's just a straightforward fight. They split the fight up into waves of the
Mhm.
bullywugs, so you're not fighting 25 bullywugs at one time. They're coming in at waves of 8, but like as they come in, even if you drop a few of the bullywugs, like more coming right behind. So nice imagery there. I love me a good bullywug. So probably one of the first, because I think I did this module probably before I did blanking on it right now, the Forbidden
Forbidden
City
City?
I1,
Yeah.
which had bullywugs in it.
Yep.
So this was probably my first introduction to bullywugs, most likely. And that's probably why. So
Mhm.
so that's my number 2, the bullywug ambush, and love it. So and
Nice.
used it. I developed an encounter basically based right off of it for when I did Denizens of the Reed Maze. I had
Mhm.
basically waves of bullywugs coming at you. So to this day, it's still with me. So that's my number 2, the bullywug ambush.
I should have figured that would definitely hit an
Sure you
chord with you, of course, no brainer, right? Well, I'm going to apologize to our audience in advance because we have another crossover. My number 1 is the bullywug encounter.
Wow, that's number 1. Wow.
Yeah, I actually, again, it's the whole package. I like the encounter. I like the fact that there's a sort of man, even though you have a wandering monster table, you're kind of very standard, I guess, kind of, swamp wandering monster table. You have this nice tough encounter right going in. I like that. Very good treasure, no doubt about it. I mean, 3 Ioun stones, whoa, is a lot.
Yeah.
Even for that,
Yeah.
considering this is like potentially a first or second level, adventure we're looking at here. I think it's what, 1 to 4 officially, but most likely the characters are first or second level. Them, dropping 3 Ioun stones at them in one shot, plus other stuff, a magical helm, and I don't know what else. Is I think there's like a +1 shield or something.
Yeah.
There's
But
really
they're
good
gonna
stuff.
earn it. 25
Oh, well,
bullywugs.
that's
They're
it.
gonna earn
Yeah.
it.
If they're
Yeah.
first level, and then
Yeah.
when you go into the tactics where you really making use of their hopping, where,
Yep.
and a lot of these, that's something I think has been lost in a lot of like later editions. This whole ranks of combat and waves of enemies. You don't see that as much
Yeah.
anymore. It doesn't seem to be used as much anymore. And Gygax and these wargamer guys, I think when they were writing these stuff, they were into that, you
Yeah.
know. And here you have the first wave comes in, and then the second wave jumps over and gets behind the
Yep.
characters, and then they talk about how the third wave jumps over, and maybe the second
Yep.
wave jumps back, and there's all
Yep.
this. You could really, I could imagine playing it at the table, having moving the character, the
Yeah.
figures over and saying, well, they jump over here, and it could really make a fun crazy encounter and a difficult encounter, I think,
Yeah.
potentially. So yeah, for the whole package, I think yeah, that was my number 1, because
Okay.
rereading it, I found it like really a delight when I started
Yeah.
going into the tactics and
The,
such. So
the kids these days, it's all about the Misty Step. So back in the
yeah,
day,
those
we didn't
kids.
have Misty Step, so things hopped. Things hopped over things. That's how you moved around. So everybody now, it's the Misty Step, the Misty Step. Oh, it's a bonus action, and it's like that's how we move around. So yeah, all
Right.
right,
And I
I'm
agree,
done. I'm done
history
with my get off the
professor.
lawn
It
mode.
is
mode.
the history professor commented it's,
Yes,
a nice encounter to kind of get you the feel of the module, that kind of
yeah,
watery aquatic feel. And it's true,
yep,
it does.
it does.
It's like
Perfect.
another sort of very natural, marshy bound enemy that, sets the stage properly.
Agreed. So all right. So my number 1 is and I do have yet another crossover.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, because I had to go for this, the optional venture at the end,
Oh,
the
okay.
giant crocodile and the Oriental dragon,
Oh,
the
wow.
panlung. Again, the artwork starts it off, and I believe there's 2 pieces of artwork, I think. Just the setup of it, the setup of you can use it for the Weregild, and you can basically pay back the lizard folk community for slaughtering part of them. So I love that part of it. But I love the fact that it's a giant crocodile, which is sacred to the lizard folk.
Mhm.
sacred to their deity, and they technically it's they can't do anything about it, and they sent a scouting party near it, and it ate 3 of them.
Mhm.
And that's where they were like, whoa, what's going on? Why would a giant croc attack us? Because we're worshiping it. And
Yeah.
that's where you get into the Pan Lung is using its scaly command to
Mhm.
control it. And that's what the true danger is. It's like you've got the croc, that's a danger, and it just makes sense that the lizard folk can't go and take
Yeah.
care of this. But oh, these group of PCs can. And again, if you've run this module the way it was intended, you probably just went through several sessions of little or no combat,
Mm.
and this is just basically a fight at the end. and
Yeah.
and again, just like that bullywug fight was probably well
Yep.
needed in the beginning, this
Yeah.
was probably really well needed at the end, where okay,
Mhm.
let's roll for initiative, and that
Yeah.
feeling of,
Yeah.
okay, roll for initiative, let's kind of get the pent up frustration out, kind of
Mhm.
thing. So I think that's just really smart adventure design.
Yeah.
And treating it, and it's kind of weird how it doesn't have its own, it's got a location, but it doesn't really have an encounter to it. It's not encounter number 53.
Mhm.
It's an optional venture if you need to use it. Here's another tool for you. It's like a page at the back.
Yeah.
And I love that. The thought and the care that went into creating
Yeah.
these 3 modules is amazing.
Yeah.
And I love it, and that's why I put that one as my number one. That's why I even trumped the Bullywug. I was going back and forth between my top 3 about where they were gonna fall.
Mhm.
And I had to just do the giant croc and the Pan Lung for my number 1.
Mhm.
So that's it, folks. That is our top 5. And once again, we are at almost at the top of the hour, so we got a couple more little final announcements just
Time flies.
to throw out there. So Rick, tell them what you got to tell them.
Sure. Well, first off, as always, thank you everyone who joined us, including that raiding party who blustered in, then broke down the doors and came raiding on in. We're thrilled to have you. If you liked what you saw, of course, give us a follow, give us a like. If you're watching us later on YouTube, don't be afraid to subscribe because it helps us. And absolutely keep those comments coming both during the Twitch broadcast and later on YouTube. We read every comment, I promise you. And it really gives us a sense of what you folks are thinking. So it's good to hear. Our next show, I think you can see where we're going maybe with this, is coming at you Sunday, August 14th at 8 p.m. And we're going to go into the last module of the series. We're going to go into U3, the final enemy. We're going to talk about some Sahugans. So we're going to wrap up the trio of adventures by going to that, which is, I think, will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that. Of the 3 modules, that's the one I know the least. I've run it only
Agreed, me
once,
too.
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I've run number 1 a ton of times. I've run number 2 a few times. And I believe I've never done it as a player. So
Isn't
I
that
really,
weird? I
yeah,
I
it is
I've
weird.
DM'd like I said, I just DM'd the first one for my kid. You know,
Yeah.
I've DM'd you one maybe 5 or 6 times. I've DM'd this module we discussed tonight one time, and I've never actually DM'd the final. I don't
Yeah.
know why. It's
Yeah,
the
I
oddest
just
thing.
think, it is, yeah, I think
Oh.
it's underwater is a little daunting,
Mm,
because it is
this is
truly
true.
underwater. It is truly
Yeah,
underwater.
yeah. Good
But you know
point.
what? And they hadn't really done underwater yet at that point. So
Yeah,
not like truly underwater. So
yeah.
again, blazing a path here, I think so. But yeah, so very, very, very iconic and a little bit tropey, but it's going to be really interesting to kind of do the summary on that. So that will be the week after Gen Con, folks. So yeah, so hopefully you guys will check us out. Then again, don't forget to check us out at Gen Con. If you're at Gen Con in Indy, in the Indianapolis area, come by, stop by at the booth, talk to us. I'll be there. I'll be around. I'll be running games and stuff like that. So come see us at Gen Con. We'd like to see you guys. We're back this year in full force. So we're really, really, really
Mhm.
looking forward to it. And then we'll do our pearls of wisdom. So Rick, why don't you go first so I don't steal
Sure.
yours?
My pearl of wisdom is sort of uh, jumping back to something I kind of mentioned back in the beginning, and I guess also addressing just the general utility of this module, which I loved, because there's so many things in here that were plug or play or useful encounters, like you said, the bullywug in the beginning. Um, I think, for the DM out there, if you're going to go through the trouble of creating a detailed layer like this, build in a little of that plug and play utility because I think every, especially beginning DM, I think you learn the hard way not to over detail certain things, and we all know as a DM you write things that what 80% of it maybe doesn't get used, and then the players will take a different path through the woods, and then you're either repurposing or you're you're winging it. So that would be my easy pearl of wisdom here is follow the example of this adventure, and that if you're going to make a lair like this and center it in the adventure, make it plug and play. That way, if the adventure doesn't fly, hey, you've got a great Lizardman lair you can pick up and move somewhere else, or a pan lung event, a pan lung sidetrack that you can pick up and move, because that too, that is another example of something that could be pick and play. Maybe it was used as a were guild. Maybe you befriend the Lizardmen, they call you back 6 months later because they're having a crocodile problem. You don't know, but think of that plug and play and make life easier for yourself. And that's my easy pearl of wisdom for tonight.
Awesome, great advice there. So my pearl of wisdom is I mentioned it earlier, jaquazing the dungeon, different ways in and out, and different connections between the levels. We didn't have that this one, but again, give your players choices whenever people want, even though they might not, even though they don't have the control they think they have, give them choices. Always make it seem like they have choices, at least A or B. When you're attempting an adventure in a stealth or an assault kind of a hideout or something, give them a couple of ways in, and they don't have to be obvious. They could be really hidden, but reward them for good tactics, and maybe not just necessarily going through the front door. It does work, but that might not be the easiest route in. So I think that's a great kind of piece of advice, and always think about that when you have other levels of a dungeon.
Definitely.
Always be thinking about different ways to look them up, because you don't want the bottleneck. You don't want that one way down. And then if they don't find it, or they get frustrated finding it, then it's just no fun. You want them to have a couple different ways down. And it's a little bit different these days. I mean, back in the first edition days, when you went down a level, it was harder. It was designed that way. It was like, so sometimes you didn't want to necessarily go down until you were ready to go down. But then you would go down and you're like, uh-oh, we're already out of our league. That was just a part of the game. This day and age is a little bit different with milestone XP and whatnot. So you can kind of get around some of those things. So always be thinking along those terms. So with that, we will sign it off from a sweltering northeast here. So again, Gen Con folks, be happy to see you guys out there in a week and a half, if you guys can have a chance to stop by. If not, we will be back at it with the third module in this series in 3 weeks. So everybody have a great night. Take care.
Stay cool, everyone.
Yeah, bye.